Welcome back, everyone. Before we dive in, make sure you drop your thoughts and the lessons you took from this story in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's get into it. My nephew worked for me. I paid for his college, gave him everything I thought a man is supposed to give family when they're trying to climb. Then I found 18 videos of him with my wife in my house. I did not confront them. I invited the family to a backyard barbecue and played the footage on a projector where everyone could see it. Her father spoke first, then my sister, and what came next tore everything apart. My name is Calvin Marshall. I am 44 years old, and up until 3 weeks ago, I thought I had life figured out. I run an import-export business I built from scratch 20 years ago. We handle electronics, specialty goods, and supplier relationships across multiple shipping lanes. It is not a corporate giant, but it pays well enough for the house outside Charlotte, the small lake cabin we visit when the weather is good, and 2 decent cars that never make me nervous when I turn the key. My wife, Yvette, is 42. She works as a marketing director at a tech company in Uptown Charlotte. Our son, Trevin, just started his 2nd year at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte, studying mechanical engineering. He is a good kid, steady, the kind of young man who still calls his mother back even when he is busy. My nephew, Brandon Sinclair, is 26. He is my sister Denise's son. Denise raised him alone after his father walked out when Brandon was 12. I stepped in where I could without trying to replace anyone. I helped with school expenses. I paid tuition when Denise was drowning. I gave Brandon his first real job in my company 3 years ago and taught him how to sit across from a supplier, look them in the eye, and negotiate without losing his temper. He is my purchasing manager now, good with vendors, sharp on contracts, or at least I thought he was sharp. It turns out he was negotiating more than wholesale prices. The discovery happened on a Tuesday. I was in my home office cleaning out old files before a quarterly audit. We used to have a nanny camera system back when Trevin was little. Yvette insisted we keep the footage archived, said it was cute memories of Trevin learning to walk, getting frosting on his face, falling asleep on the couch. I moved the old drives into a box in my closet years ago and forgot about them. That afternoon, I was clearing space on my computer when I found a backup drive labeled Home Security Archive. I almost tossed it. Almost. But something made me plug it in. Curiosity, maybe. Instinct, definitely. The drive took forever to load. When the file list finally appeared, most clips were what I expected. Trevin's birthday party, Yvette gardening, me grilling burgers. Then I saw a thumbnail dated August 2020. The preview frame showed our living room, the leather couch Yvette picked out, the wine rack, the big family photo wall, and 2 people who should never have been alone together in my house on a weekday afternoon. I clicked play. Yvette walked into frame first, laughing at something off camera. She was wearing the blue sundress I bought her for our anniversary. Then Brandon appeared behind her, holding a bottle of wine from our collection, one I had been saving for a special occasion. He opened it like he owned the place, like it was his house, his wine, his right to be there. They sat close, too close. Her hand touched his arm, then his knee, then his face. I did not move. I did not breathe. I watched as my wife leaned into my nephew the way she used to lean into me. The timestamp in the corner glowed steady, cold as a receipt. Wednesday, afternoon, the exact kind of time I was usually on the road dealing with shipments. The footage lasted 11 minutes. I watched all of it. Then I watched it again. My hand stayed steady on the mouse. No shaking, no tears, just a cold, expanding emptiness in my chest like someone had opened a door in the middle of me and let everything decent blow out. When I closed the file, the sun had already set outside my office window. I could hear Yvette downstairs in the kitchen humming while she made dinner. Same tune she always hummed when she was focused. The same woman who kissed me goodbye that morning, who asked me to pick up milk on the way home, who had no idea I had just seen her betrayal in crystal clear video. I did not confront her that night. I went downstairs, ate the pasta she made, complimented the sauce, laughed at the story she told about a coworker's meeting. She smiled across the table and asked about my day. I told her it was fine, productive, nothing unusual. But everything had already changed, and she had no idea the clock had started ticking. The next morning, I woke up at 5. Yvette was still asleep, breathing steady and peaceful. I looked at her lying there, hair spread across the pillow, and felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, just calculation. I went into my office and started digging. The backup drive held more than that one video. Much more. I found 18 separate files spread across 4 months in 2020. Different days, different times. Always when I was traveling, meeting with freight partners, or stuck at the warehouse. Always midweek afternoons. Always my house, my couch, my wine. I copied everything to 3 different drives. One went into a safe deposit box at the bank under my name only. One stayed locked in my office desk. One I uploaded to a secure cloud account I created under a new email address Yvette had never seen. Then I started looking at our finances. I always let Yvette handle our personal accounts. She was better with budgets, she said. I focused on the business. That division of labor worked for 20 years. Or I thought it did. Now I pulled up our joint checking account and scanned the statements line by line like I was reading lab results. For the first hour, everything looked normal. Groceries, utilities, gas, school expenses. Then I found it. A transfer to an external account. $5,000. The memo line said, loan to Denise. I remember the conversation. Denise needed help with a car repair, and Yvette offered to transfer money. I agreed without thinking because that is what family does. But the account number attached to the transfer was not Denise's. I checked the next month. Another transfer, $3,000. Memo, Denise car repair. The month after that, $4,000. Then $5,000. Then $6,000. The pattern continued through 2021 in neat, clean increments. By December, the total was $32,000. I went to the bank in person the moment they opened. A representative printed the transfer details and slid the paper across the desk like it was nothing. The external account belonged to Brandon Sinclair. $32,000. My money transferred by my wife to my nephew while they were sleeping together in my house. I sat in my car in the bank parking lot for 20 minutes staring at the statement printouts. The numbers did not lie. The dates aligned with the videos. This was not one mistake. This was systematic. Planned. They used my travel schedule like a calendar of opportunity. I drove to the office. Brandon was already there in the purchasing department typing at his computer like he was building my future with every keystroke. He looked up and gave me that easy smile he always had. Brandon said, "Morning, Uncle Cal. Early start." Today, I kept my voice level and said, "Just trying to stay ahead of the quarter." Brandon said, "Need anything from me?" I said, "Not right now. Keep doing what you were doing." He nodded, relaxed, and went back to work. I walked into my office, closed the door, and stared at my own reflection in the glass. I pulled up our corporate credit card statements. Brandon had a company card because I trusted him with business expenses, vendor meals, travel, shipping deposits. I scrolled through the charges. Most were legitimate. Restaurants near the warehouse. Hotels during trade shows. Then I saw the others. Jewelry stores, florists, a women's boutique, a spa booking. Nothing to do with business. I cross-referenced the dates with the videos. The jewelry purchase happened 2 days before one of the files. The florist charge was the same week as another. My nephew was buying gifts for my wife with my credit card, and I had been approving the expenses every month without looking twice. I printed everything. Every bank statement. Every suspicious transfer. Every credit card charge. Every invoice Brandon had ever submitted. The stack grew thick on my desk, a quiet tower of betrayal. Around 10, Brandon knocked on my door. Brandon said, "I have a supplier meeting across town. I will be back around 2. I did not look up. I said, "Take your time." He left, and I watched from the window as he got into the car I helped him buy last year, a car I gave him a bonus for specifically so he could make the down payment. I watched him drive away and felt something inside me shift from hurt to resolve. That afternoon, I met with a lawyer. Her name is Elaine Watkins. Mid-50s, steel gray hair, calm eyes that did not miss anything. I laid the evidence out on her desk. The transfers, the corporate card charges, the timestamps. Elaine studied each page in silence and wrote notes on a yellow legal pad. Elaine said, "This is not a random affair. This is coordinated." I said, "I was not supposed to find that drive." Elaine said, "They were careless because they did not think you would check." Elaine leaned back and said, "Here's what you do. Keep everything quiet. Act normal. Gather more evidence if you can. Do not confront either of them yet." I said, "I will not." Elaine said, "Good. Because the moment you tip your hand, they will cover tracks, delete messages, move money, create a story where you are the villain." I nodded. I understood perfectly. The clock was ticking, but only I could hear it. That night, I remembered something from years ago, a 4th of July weekend at the lake cabin. The whole family came. Denise, Brandon, Yvette's parents, cousins, friends. Trevin had been home between semesters. I pulled up my old photos, scrolling through fireworks and burgers and people laughing on the dock. Then I found the picture that made my stomach turn. In the foreground, slightly out of focus, Brandon's hand was on Yvette's lower back, and she was leaning into him, laughing like a woman who belonged with him. I remembered seeing it back then and telling myself it was nothing. Family closeness, I told myself. I'm being paranoid. Now I stared at it and realized my instincts had tried to warn me, and I had trained myself to ignore them. The next morning, I pulled Brandon's employment file. I hired him right after he finished his associate degree. The degree I paid for, tuition, books, fees. I wrote the checks myself and felt proud to help my nephew get an education. He started as a warehouse assistant. Within 6 months, I promoted him. A year later, I promoted him again. I justified every step because he seemed hardworking and because helping him felt like helping Denise. I started adding up what I had given him over the years. Tuition, bonuses, a loan I forgave when he said he was struggling, the car down payment, holiday checks. The total was $76,000. Add the $32,000 Yvette transferred. Add the $12,000 in suspicious corporate card charges. $120,000. That is what betrayal had already cost me before divorce paperwork even hit a courthouse. On Thursday, Yvette texted me, "Do not forget Trevin is coming home this weekend. Maybe we could do dinner Saturday." I typed back, "Sound good. Looking forward to it." She sent a heart emoji. I stared at that bright little symbol on my screen and wondered how she did it. How she kissed me goodnight, asked about my day, and lived inside a lie so comfortably that she could decorate it with affection. Trevin came home Friday afternoon. He looked good, taller somehow, even though that is not how biology works. He hugged me hard. I held on a second longer than usual because I needed something real. Yvette came down the stairs smiling like everything was normal. Yvette said, "There's my boy." She hugged Trevin, asked about classes, asked if he was eating enough, asked if his roommates were still loud. We had dinner, the three of us. Pot roast, potatoes, the whole familiar routine. We talked about engineering projects and campus life. Normal conversation, normal laughter, normal family rhythm. And the entire time, I watched Trevin the way you watch a storm cloud you hope will pass. He barely looked at his mother. He pushed food around his plate more than he ate. His smile did not quite reach his eyes. After dinner, Trevin and I sat on the back patio while Yvette cleaned up. I handed Trevin a beer. He took it without comment. Trevin stared at the bottle and then said, "Dad, can I ask you something?" I said, "Anything." Trevin hesitated and glanced toward the house as if he did not want his mother hearing. Trevin said, "Are you and Mom okay?" My chest tightened. I forced my face to stay calm. I said, "Marriage has ups and downs. We are fine." Trevin nodded, but his eyes said he did not believe me. Then Trevin asked, "And Brandon, how is he doing at work?" I said, "He is fine." "Why?" Trevin shrugged and said, "No reason. He's been weird lately. He used to text me all the time. We played games online, talked about sports. The last few months, he disappears for days. Then he says he is busy." Trevin crushed the empty bottle in his hand like he was trying to crush the feeling behind it. Trevin said, "He was like the older brother I never had. Now it feels like he is avoiding me." I felt cold settle in my stomach. Brandon was pulling away from Trevin because guilt has a smell, and even the guilty try to avoid breathing it. I told Trevin, "People get busy. It might not be personal." Trevin nodded, but he still looked uneasy. Before he went inside, he said, "You know I love you, right? No matter what happens." I swallowed and said, "I love you too." The next morning, my phone rang from an unknown number. A young woman introduced herself. She said, "Mr. Marshall, my name is Gabrielle Merritt." I am Brandon's girlfriend. I sat up straighter. I said, "Hello, Gabrielle." Her voice shook. She said, "I need to talk to you in person. I cannot talk to Denise about this." I did not know what to do. We agreed to meet at a coffee shop across town. Gabrielle was 29, petite, with worried eyes and hands wrapped around a cup of tea she never drank. She looked like someone who had not slept in weeks. Gabrielle said, "I think Brandon is cheating on me." I said, "Tell me what makes you think that." Gabrielle said, "He is gone all the time. He says he is working, but when I call the office, he has already left hours ago. He comes home smelling like perfume, not mine. He is weird about his phone. He will not let me see it. He changed his passwords. Last week I found a receipt in his jacket for jewelry. Expensive jewelry. He never gave me anything." She showed me a photo of the receipt on her phone. It matched the jewelry store on the corporate statement like a fingerprint. I asked why she came to me. Gabrielle swallowed hard and said, "Because you are his uncle. You are his boss. If I accuse him, he tells me I'm paranoid. But you would know, or you could find out." Then Gabrielle added the part that made my blood run cold all over again. Gabrielle said, "I am pregnant. 10 weeks. She pressed a hand over her stomach like she was protecting something fragile from the air. Gabrielle said, "I wanted to announce it at the family barbecue next week. Denise is organizing it. I thought it would be special, but now I do not know if I should even show up." I wanted to tell Gabrielle everything right there. I wanted to hand her the truth like a shield. But I needed the reveal to be controlled, clean, and undeniable, not a messy leak that gave Yvette and Brandon time to spin stories. So I gave Gabrielle what I could, confirmation without details. I said yes. I believe he is cheating. Gabrielle nodded like she already knew. She whispered, "What should I do?" I said, "Come to the barbecue. Do not tell Brandon about the pregnancy beforehand. Trust me." Gabrielle frowned, confused. I said, "Come. Everything will be clear." She stared at me for a long moment and then nodded once, slow. That night, Brandon came to dinner at my house. He sat at my table, ate my food, made Trevin laugh with stories about work, and watched my wife smile at him like they were sharing an inside joke. Yvette touched Brandon's arm when he told a joke. Right in front of me, right in front of our son. I cataloged every glance and every casual touch, not because I needed more proof, but because part of me still could not believe human beings could do this so calmly. The week before the barbecue moved in slow motion. Every day felt like walking through a minefield while smiling politely. I met with Elaine again, and she brought in a forensic accountant named Grant Ellis. Grant spread bank statements across a conference table and ran his finger down the columns with mechanical precision. Grant said, "The pattern is clear. Monthly transfers, round numbers, consistent memo lines. This is deception." Elaine said, "We will file right after your event. We will have papers ready." I asked about criminal charges. Elaine said, "Joint account access complicates things, but the false memos naming your sister give us leverage. Also, the corporate card misuse is a separate matter." I thought about Denise. My sister had no idea her name had been used as a cover. That part hurt almost as much as the affair itself. I upgraded the security system at my house and linked the feed to my phone. I told Yvette it was better resolution because packages had been stolen in the neighborhood. She did not question it. Why would she? I never questioned her. I moved $50,000 out of our joint savings into an account under my name only, following Elaine's advice to secure assets before filing. I did not drain everything, just enough to make sure Yvette could not wipe us out in one angry afternoon. On Friday, Brandon asked for a day off. Brandon said, "Personal business. I will be back Monday." I approved it without hesitation. Later, I checked the tracking on the company phone we issued him. He spent time in a jewelry store in South Park, then drove to a restaurant in Uptown and stayed for 2 hours. When he left, he did not go home. He went to a hotel. I watched the little moving dot on my screen and felt my stomach harden into something like stone. Friday night, Trevin sat with me again on the patio. Trevin said, "Dad, I've been thinking about taking a semester off." I asked why. Trevin looked down and said, "I cannot focus. I cannot sleep. Everything feels wrong, like something is coming." He looked up and whispered, "Am I crazy?" I wanted to tell him. I wanted to spare him the shock that was coming on Sunday. But I needed him present. I needed him to see what I saw so he did not spend the next decade doubting himself. I said, "You're not crazy. Sometimes you sense things before you understand them. But you and I are going to get through whatever is coming." Trevin swallowed and nodded. Saturday, I prepared like a man preparing for a lawsuit, because that is exactly what it was. I checked each file. I labeled each transaction. I created a clean timeline. I printed copies for Elaine and duplicates for myself. I tested the projector. I tested the audio. I edited the videos down so nothing explicit played, just enough to remove any doubt. Kissing. Sitting too close. Hands where they should not be. Familiarity that did not belong in my living room. I did not want anyone claiming it was misunderstood. I wanted it unmistakable but not graphic. That night, Yvette curled up next to me in bed and put her head on my chest like she had done for 20 years. Yvette whispered, "I love you." I stared at the ceiling and said, "I love you too." The lie came out my mouth so smoothly, I almost hated myself for how easy it was. Then I remembered she had been doing it for years, and I let the hatred settle where it belonged. Sunday arrived hot and bright, perfect weather for a backyard barbecue. I woke before dawn. Yvette slept beside me like she had nothing to fear. I showered, dressed in jeans and a plain polo shirt, and loaded the car with what I needed: laptop, projector, extension cords, and a small flash drive tucked in my pocket like a match. Yvette came downstairs in a yellow sundress. She kissed my cheek and said, "You are up early." I said, "Could not sleep. Excited to see everyone." Yvette smiled and said, "Me too. Denise has been talking about this all week." Yvette poured coffee and added, casually, "Brandon is bringing Gabrielle. She is sweet." I nodded like I was hearing it for the first time. Denise's backyard was already full when we arrived. She had tables covered with food, a grill going, coolers full of drinks. Yvette's parents were there, Harold and Vivian. Cousins, a couple of family friends. Brandon stood by the grill laughing like he was a good son and a good nephew and a good employee. Gabrielle stood beside him with one hand resting protectively on her stomach. When she saw me, she gave a small nod. Trevin stayed close to me, quiet, eyes scanning faces like he was trying to solve a problem without the numbers. I set up the projector and screen near the patio. Denise clapped her hands and said, "Cal found some old family videos we were going to watch later. Like a memory show." People cheered. They thought it was nostalgia. They thought it would be laughter. We ate. We talked. We pretended. Brandon told a story about a supplier deal like he was proud. Yvette laughed. Trevin barely smiled. Gabrielle looked like she might throw up. Around 2 o'clock I stood, tapped a fork against the glass, and said, "Everyone, I want to show something." The crowd pulled chairs closer. People leaned in. Yvette sat front row smiling like a proud wife. Brandon stood behind her, casual, confident. Harold and Vivian sat together with plates in their laps. Denise stood near the table with her arms crossed, happy to see everyone gathered. I turned on the projector. The screen went white, then flickered to life. I said, "This might be uncomfortable, but it is necessary." Then I pressed play. Our living room filled the screen. The leather couch, the wine rack, the timestamp in the corner. Yvette walked in a frame laughing. Brandon followed, holding a bottle of my wine. The backyard went silent so quickly it felt like someone had cut the sound out of the world. Yvette's smile froze. Brandon's face drained of color. Trevin made a small sound in his throat like he was choking on air. The video showed exactly what it showed. Nothing to debate. Nothing to explain away. Hands touching. Bodies too close. A kiss that did not belong to a family. Vivian brought a hand to her mouth. Harold stood slowly, his chair scraping the ground loud enough to sound like a warning. He stared at the screen, jaw working, and finally said, "In his house." His voice cracked on the words. "You did this in his house." Yvette whispered, "Turn it off." Her voice sounded thin, like it was coming from far away. I did not respond. I let the clip run for a few more seconds and then cut it and pulled up a second clip. Different date. Same couch. Same betrayal. Denise's face changed from confusion to horror as her brain caught up. Denise took a step toward Brandon, then another like she could not believe her own eyes. Brandon said, "Mom." Denise snapped, "Do not." The single word was sharp enough to slice. I paused the playback and faced everyone. I said, "There are 18 videos. For months. 2020, different afternoons. Always when I was traveling for work. The files are time-stamped. Verified." Harold turned toward Yvette with a look I had never seen on him. Harold said, "Tell me this is not true." Yvette opened her mouth and nothing came out. Gabrielle stepped forward, voice shaking but clear. Gabrielle said, "The perfume. The missing nights. The jewelry receipt. I came today because I needed the truth." She looked at Brandon and said, "I am 12 weeks pregnant." A ripple of shock went through the crowd, but it was nothing compared to what was already on the screen. Brandon's mouth opened and closed. He looked at Gabrielle like a man watching his life collapse in real time. Gabrielle's eyes filled with tears. She said, "I was going to announce it today. Now I understand what you have been doing." Denise moved. She walked straight up to Brandon and slapped him so hard the sound snapped across the backyard. Denise's voice shook with something deeper than anger. Denise said, "You have 24 hours to get out of my house." Brandon touched his cheek and whispered, "Mom, please." Denise said, 24 hours. Then I changed the locks. "I do not know who you are." Yvette stood up, tears streaming. She turned toward me and hissed, "You cannot just talk to me? You had to humiliate me in front of everyone." I looked at her and kept my voice calm. I said, "You humiliated yourself. I just stopped protecting your lie." Yvette's shoulders trembled. She said, "You spied on me." I said, "It was our home security archive, the system you insisted we keep." Then I held up printed bank statements and said, "And while we are here, you transferred $32,000 to Brandon using Denise's name as the memo." Denise's head snapped toward Yvette. Denise whispered, "What?" The pain on my sister's face looked like a physical injury. Harold took one step toward Brandon like he might lunge. Harold said, "You took money too?" Brandon stammered. Harold cut him off. Harold said, "Be quiet." Vivian was crying openly now, not loud, just steady tears like grief. Trevin stood frozen, eyes locked on Brandon as if the person he thought he knew had turned into someone else. Trevin moved next. My son walked toward Brandon with a slow, controlled step. Trevin's voice shook. Trevin said, "You are my family. You were supposed to protect us." Brandon tried to speak. Brandon said, "Trevin, listen." Trevin's fist connected with Brandon's jaw before anyone could stop it. Brandon went down onto the grass. A thin line of blood appeared at the corner of his mouth. Yvette screamed Trevin's name like she had any authority left. I grabbed Trevin's shoulder and said, "Enough." Trevin's breathing was heavy, but he stepped back, fists shaking. People started leaving in stunned silence. Some did not even say goodbye. Harold and Vivian left without speaking to Yvette. Harold's face looked carved out of stone, and Vivian's shoulders shook as she walked. Denise stood in her yard, staring at Brandon on the ground as if she could not recognize her own child. Gabrielle wiped her face, looked once at Brandon, and then walked away without another word. The way she left was not dramatic. It was final. I packed up the projector. Denise approached me, eyes red. Denise said, "You knew for weeks." I said, 3 weeks. Denise swallowed hard. Denise said, "You could have told me." I asked quietly, "Would you have believed me without proof?" Denise's mouth trembled. She whispered, "No." I would have defended him. I would have blamed you. I hate that about myself. I said, "I did not want to destroy you. I wanted the truth to survive." Denise nodded and said, "Thank you for not letting me live inside a lie." We drove home in silence. Yvette drove separately, leaving later. Trevin stared out the passenger window the whole way, jaw clenched, eyes glossy. When we got home, Trevin did not go to his room. He walked into my office and sat across from me like he needed to anchor himself to something stable. Trevin said, "How long have you known?" I said, 3 weeks. Trevin's face crumpled. Trevin said, "And you had to live with her like everything was normal." I said, "Yes." Trevin looked down and whispered, "I feel stupid." I said, "You are not stupid. You trusted family. That is not stupidity. That is love." Trevin nodded. but the nod looked like it cost him something. That night Yvette came home. She knocked on my office door like a stranger. Her face was blotchy from crying, eyes red, hair pulled back like she had been yanking at it. Yvette said, "Can we talk?" I said, "There is not much to say." Yvette stepped inside anyway and sat down. She tried to start with a story. Yvette said, "It started by accident. Brandon came over to drop off papers. I was working from home. We talked. I cut her off. I said, 'Do not insult me. Accidents do not have 18 videos.'" Yvette flinched like I slapped her with words. Yvette's expression hardened. She tried another tactic. Yvette said, "You recorded me without my consent." I said, "It was the security archive, and my lawyer already confirmed it is admissible." Yvette's eyes widened. Yvette said, "You already have a lawyer?" I said yes, because you and Brandon did not just cheat. You stole. You used Denise as a cover. You used my company credit card for gifts. You were living off my work while disrespecting my life. Yvette whispered, "I was going to pay it back." I said, "With what?" "With the salary you are about to lose when this reaches your employer." Yvette jumped up, panicked. Yvette said, "You cannot ruin my career." I said, "I am not ruining anything. You did that yourself the moment you decided this was acceptable." Then I said the sentence I had been holding for 3 weeks. I said, "I am filing for divorce." Yvette stared at me, trembling. She said, "You are taking everything." I said, "I am keeping what is mine. The house is in my name. The business is mine. We will divide assets fairly, but I will not reward betrayal." Yvette's mouth twisted. She said, "I hate you." I said, "No. You hate that you got caught." Trevin appeared in the doorway. He did not look at his mother. He looked at me. Trevin said, "Dad, I cannot talk to her." I said, "You do not have to." Yvette turned toward Trevin, desperate. Yvette said, "Trevin, please." Trevin shook his head once, slow, and walked away. That single movement hurt her more than any shouting would have. The next morning, I walked into Elaine Watkins's office with Trevin. The divorce paperwork was ready. Elaine reviewed the file and said, "Everything is in order." I signed. Elaine said, "She will be served at work. She will likely try to negotiate, but the evidence reduces her options." Elaine also filed a report regarding corporate card misuse tied to Brandon's spending, because my business could not afford to look complicit. I was not going to let my reputation bleed for the sake of people who already tried to bleed me dry. When I got to the office, Brandon's desk was empty. I had security pack his belongings and box them up. I told my operations manager, Damon Price, that Brandon no longer worked for us. Damon did not ask questions. He just said, "I am sorry," like a man who knows some things do not need details. Yvette was served Tuesday afternoon at her office. She called me immediately, voice shaking with rage and fear. Yvette said, "You are really doing this?" I said, "Yes." Yvette said, "You embarrass me." I said, "You embarrass yourself." She tried to threaten me, then tried to beg, then tried to blame me. None of it changed anything. Denise called later that week. Denise said, "Brandon is living in a motel off the highway." I said he made his choices. Denise cried, and then she got quiet. Denise said, "I keep thinking about when he was little. I keep thinking about the boy I raised." I said, "The boy you raised is not the man he became. That part is not your fault." Denise whispered, "It still feels like it." I said, "It is his responsibility, not yours." Gabrielle emailed me a few days later. The message was short. She said she had scheduled a medical appointment and was moving back to be near family. She thanked me for making the truth impossible to ignore. I did not reply with long speeches. I simply wrote back, "I am sorry you were hurt. I hope you find peace." That was all. Yvette's employer asked her to resign within 2 weeks. They did not call it morality. They called it reputational risk. That was the polite way the world punishes private betrayal when it spills in a public view. Yvette moved into a short-term rental in Charlotte. She asked to see Trevin. I told her she could, but Trevin had to decide when he was ready. Trevin did not answer her calls for a while. Over the next month, I did not travel overseas. I did not flee. I stayed in Charlotte and did the quiet work of rebuilding. I met with accountants. I tightened company policies. I separated personal finances. I changed locks. I updated security codes. I made sure the life I built could not be accessed by the same hands that try to take it apart. Trevin and I took a trip, but we kept it American, not as an escape, but as a reset. We drove west through Tennessee, crossed into Arkansas, then down into Texas for wide skies and long roads where silence does not feel suffocating. We went to national parks, ate at small diners, and sat in hotel rooms watching basketball games neither of us cared about just to feel normal again. In New Mexico, Trevin finally talked. Trevin said, "I keep replaying it. Every time she hugged me, every time Brandon laughed with me, I feel like my whole childhood was fake." I kept my hands on the steering wheel and said, "Your childhood was real. Your mother's betrayal does not erase the years she did right by you. And Brandon's betrayal does not erase your own character. Do not let their choices rewrite who you are." Trevin nodded slowly and whispered, "I am trying." When we got back to Charlotte, Trevin decided to take the semester off. He did not quit his future. He just pressed pause to recover. I supported him without hesitation. I had learned the hard way that the only thing worth protecting more than money is the people who still deserve your trust. The divorce finalized without a trial. Yvette signed because she had no ground to stand on. Brandon tried to contact me once through an email that started with "Uncle Cal. Please let me explain." I deleted it without opening. Some explanations are just excuses wearing a suit. On the day the final documents came through, I did not celebrate with a party. I sat on my back patio with a glass of water and listened to the quiet. Trevin came outside and sat beside me. Trevin said, "What happens now?" I looked out at the yard, at the life that still existed after betrayal tried to burn it down. I said, "Now we keep going. We build a new normal, and we do not lie to ourselves anymore." Trevin nodded and sat there with me until the sun went down, and for the first time in weeks, the silence felt like relief instead of shock. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and share this video with your friends. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful story drop.